I gave my son everything I had, and on my 70th birthday, he handed me an eviction notice. This is a story about what happens when a mother's lifetime of sacrifice is repaid with coldness, and when silence becomes the only dignified response left. My name is Helen, and I raised my son Daniel alone after his father walked out when he was 3. I worked double shifts at the hospital for 20 years so he could have piano lessons and summer camps and a college education without debt. I never remarried because I wanted to focus entirely on giving him the life he deserved. When Daniel graduated with his business degree, I felt like every sleepless night had been worth it. He got a good job at a consulting firm, and within 5 years he was making more money than I ever dreamed of. I was so proud of him. He married a woman named Vanessa when he was 28, and I liked her at first. She was polished and ambitious, and she seemed to make Daniel happy. They bought a large house in a neighborhood I could never have afforded, and I visited every few weeks. I always brought homemade food, because I knew they were both busy with work. Vanessa would smile and thank me, but I started noticing she never ate what I brought. She would put the containers in the refrigerator, and I would see them still there, untouched on my next visit. I told myself she just had different tastes. When I turned 65, I retired from the hospital with a modest pension and some savings. Daniel suggested I sell my small house and move in with them. He said they had plenty of space, and it would be nice to have family close. I was hesitant because I valued my independence, but he insisted. He said I had given him everything, and now it was his turn to take care of me. That phrase made me feel warm and loved. I sold my house and gave Daniel half the proceeds to help with some investments he was making. He promised he would manage the money well and make sure I was taken care of. I moved into their guest room on the 2nd floor. The first few months were pleasant enough. I cooked dinners and kept the house tidy, and tried not to be in the way. But I started noticing small changes in how Vanessa spoke to me. She would make comments about how I folded the towels wrong, or how my cooking was too heavy. I tried to adjust and do things her way. Daniel never said anything when she criticized me. He would just look uncomfortable and change the subject. I told myself he was caught in the middle and didn't want to create conflict. Then Vanessa got pregnant and everything shifted. Suddenly I was expected to be available whenever they needed help, but also to stay out of sight when they had friends over. Vanessa started calling me by my first name instead of Mom. She said it felt more modern and comfortable. I didn't argue because I didn't want to seem difficult. When the baby arrived, I thought things might get better. I helped with night feedings and diaper changes and cooking meals while Vanessa recovered. But instead of appreciation, I felt more invisible. She had strong opinions about how everything should be done with the baby. She didn't want me holding him too much because she read that grandparents can confuse the attachment process. I bit my tongue and stepped back. He was always at work, and when he came home, he was exhausted. I rarely got time alone with him anymore. One evening, I overheard Vanessa talking on the phone in the kitchen. She was speaking to her mother and complaining about having me in the house. She said I was always hovering, and that she felt like she had no privacy. She said she couldn't wait until they figured out a way to get their space back. My stomach dropped. I went upstairs and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I wondered if he felt the same way. A few weeks later, Daniel came to my room and said they needed to talk. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked uncomfortable. He said she was feeling overwhelmed and they thought it might be better if I looked into senior living communities. He said it wasn't about me, but about them needing space as a family. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I asked him where I was supposed to go with no house and limited savings. He said he would help me find an affordable place. I reminded him that I gave him a big amount of money from my house sale. He looked away and said that money had been invested and wasn't liquid right now. I didn't push further because I felt too humiliated. I started looking at senior apartments in the area. The decent ones were far beyond what my pension could cover. The ones I could afford were small and depressing. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but I kept it to myself. I didn't want to be the bitter mother who guilted her son. On my 17th birthday, I woke up hoping he might at least take me to dinner. Instead, he came to my room in the afternoon with an envelope. He said they had made a decision and handed me the envelope. Inside was a formal eviction notice giving me 30 days to vacate. I stared at the paper and felt something inside me go cold. He said it was just a formality for legal purposes and that he hoped I understood. I looked at my son and barely recognized him. I asked if this was really what he wanted. He said Vanessa had been very stressed, and they needed to prioritize their immediate family. I nodded slowly and told him I would be out within the month. He looked relieved and left the room quickly. I sat there, holding that piece of paper, and something shifted in me. I wasn't going to cry or beg or make a scene. I was going to handle this with the same quiet strength I had used my whole life. I called my old friend Margaret, who I had worked with at the hospital. She had always told me I could stay with her if I ever needed anything. She said yes immediately and told me to take my time. Then I made another call to a lawyer. I explained the situation and asked about the money I had given Daniel. The lawyer said that without documentation showing it was a gift, I might have a case to claim it as a loan. I remembered that when I gave Daniel the money, he had written me a casual note saying he would pay me back once his investments matured. I had kept that note in my personal files. The lawyer said that note could be useful. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered all my belongings. I didn't tell Daniel or Vanessa anything beyond confirming my move-out date. They seemed happy and relieved. Vanessa even said she hoped there were no hard feelings. I smiled and said, of course not. 3 days before I moved out, I had the lawyer send Daniel a formal letter. It stated that based on his written note, the money I had given him was a loan, and I was requesting repayment within 60 days. The amount with reasonable interest came to just over $90,000. I wasn't there when he received the letter, but Margaret told me he called me 15 times that evening. I didn't answer. He showed up at Margaret's house the next day looking panicked. He said I was being unreasonable, and that I knew the money was a gift. I showed him the note he had written in his own handwriting. He said it was just something he scribbled and didn't mean anything legal. I said that wasn't what my lawyer thought. He asked how I could do this to him. I looked at him calmly and said I was simply asking for what was mine, just as he had asked me to leave what I thought was my home. He said he didn't have that kind of money available. I suggested he figure it out the same way he expected me to figure out where to live on a fixed income. Vanessa called me 2 days later. She was crying and said I was tearing their family apart. She said they had plans for that money and couldn't just come up with $90,000. I said I had plans too when I sold my house. She hung up on me. My lawyer told me they tried to contest the loan, but the note Daniel had written was clear enough. They would either have to pay or face a lawsuit that would cost them even more. In the end, they took out a loan against their house to pay me back. I received a check 6 weeks after I moved out. I deposited it and felt nothing but calm. Daniel sent me a long email saying I had betrayed him, and that he never thought his own mother would be so cruel. I read it once and deleted it. I didn't respond. Margaret kept telling me I should feel guilty, but I didn't. I felt something closer to peace. I used the money to put a down payment on a small condo near the coast. It was bright and quiet and entirely mine. I furnished it simply and started taking long walks on the beach every morning. For the first time in decades, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't hear from Daniel for almost a year. Then one afternoon, he showed up at my door. He looked older and tired. He said Vanessa had left him and taken their son. He said she blamed him for the financial stress and said he had always put his mother before his own family. He said he didn't know where else to go. I stood in the doorway and looked at him. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I just felt sad. I invited him in and made him tea. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he said he was sorry. He said he had been weak and let Vanessa control everything. He said he should have stood up for me. I told him I forgave him, but that things would never be the same. He nodded and started to cry. I didn't reach out to comfort him. I let him sit with his regret. He asked if he could visit sometimes. I said he could, but only if he understood that I had my own life now. He said he understood. Over the next few years, Daniel did visit. We rebuilt something small and careful. It wasn't the relationship we once had, but it was honest. He never asked me for anything, and I never offered. I watched him slowly become a better version of himself. He got joint custody of his son and worked hard to be present. I met my grandson a few times, and he was a sweet child. But I kept my distance. I had learned that love without boundaries is just another form of loss. On my 75th birthday, Daniel brought me flowers and a card. Inside, he had written that he finally understood what I had done. He said I had taught him that dignity matters more than keeping the peace. I smiled and thanked him. We had lunch on my small patio overlooking the water. He told me about his life and I listened. When he left, I felt grateful. Not for the reconciliation, but for the fact that I had chosen myself. I had spent so many years giving everything away, and in the end, the only person who truly took care of me was me. I sit on my patio now most evenings and watch the sunset. I think about all the years I worked and sacrificed. I don't regret raising Daniel or loving him, but I also don't regret standing up for myself when it mattered most. Some people might say I was harsh. They might say a mother should forgive anything, but I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean erasing your own worth. It means recognizing that people make choices, and those choices have consequences. Daniel made his choice when he handed me that eviction notice. I made mine when I asked for my money back. We both have to live with what we decided. I sleep well at night in my small condo by the sea. I have enough money to live comfortably. I have friends who respect me. I have peace. And that is more than I ever had when I was trying to be everything for everyone else. Sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching someone that you cannot be discarded. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I finally understood that I mattered too.